I'm down here, Steven! Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, with Title Update 2 hitting Monster Hunter Wilds, we had 2 returning flagship monsters added to the game. Legiacrus was given a bit more of a spotlight as the star of the update, given it's been much longer since we'd last had him in a Monster Hunter game, but Seregios is personally one of my favorite fights in Monster Hunter Wilds right now due to his pure speed and his mostly physical moveset, which makes him an absolute joy to play against with an offsetting weapon. That said, as part of his journey into the wilds, he also has a number of fun little quirky animations, or things that he does as idle animations. He has a turf war with Rey Dau, and of course past all that he also has a tempered version that is an 8-star quest with a bit of difference to it, meaning supposedly it's on par with the rest of the hardest hunts in the game, and well, if you haven't tried it yourself yet, let me tell you, it absolutely is, and in a really fun, enjoyable way too. That said, let's start off with the just fun things that Seregios can do in Wilds to begin with. If you follow him around for a little bit without drawing aggro, meaning using something like Ghillie Mantle, you're likely to see him picking at his wings with his face. This is to represent him cleaning his scales, as his whole thing really is just about how sharp his scales are, and just like man-made blades, if you do not clean them regularly and properly, they won't be anywhere near as sharp or potent, especially when exposed to the weather constantly like he is, as it's like his skin or something. Look, I'm not a zoo. A slightly rare animation, as you'll only see this if he's about to leave a zone while he doesn't have aggro on you, is that he will scratch the floor, either with his head and his horn, or he will do it with his claws on his feet sometimes as well. He does this right before he leaves a zone, and it leaves behind an investigation track that you can then interact with and pick up for a free scale. If I were to make an educated guess, this is likely a sort of territorial decision. Before leaving a zone, he marks it with his scales, leaving them behind. Then he leaves, sort of like a dog peeing on a fire hydrant, but much more likely to make someone bleed if they accidentally fall on it. As well, he will perch up on the cliff of the Windward Plains, up where all the droppable boulders are, and he'll just look down at the area. He is an extremely fast flying predator. This is essentially him surveying the area, searching for prey, which is a really neat animation to have in as well, especially considering that it only triggers if he happens to be in the right zone and he happens to not be fighting anyone. As you fight Steve, he will fire out his scales at you, and when he does and they don't hit a player, sometimes they will lodge in the ground and stick around as a new type of slinger ammo called Bladescale Pods. These, when you shoot them at a monster, will make them slowly tick for a small amount of damage every couple of seconds. Think of this sort of like a significantly weaker poison status proc, like significantly weaker, but it functions relatively similar, just small bits of damage applying over time. If you hit a monster with multiple Bladescale Pods, they will tick multiple times more frequently, but this is not just a thing that is generally neat, but it means if you are fighting Seregios, you should take advantage of these being dropped and use them during moments when he is out of your weapon's range, as the damage will add up over time. It's not massive, but it helps. Or if you are fighting another monster and Seregios is on the map, maybe they end up fighting Seregios for a moment and some of these drop on the floor, you might end up in a situation where you can collect some of these and then use them to increase your damage against your main target. Past that, he has one singular turf war as of this moment, and it's with the apex of the Windward Plains, Rey Dau. This turf war is absolutely incredible. They have a bit of a physical brawl, but then Rey Dau just fucking pins Seregios to the floor and gives him a point-blank railgun right to the face. Seregios is weak to thunder, of course, especially on the head, so this was probably never going to go his way, but this one is absolutely brutal and a very clear victory for Rey Dau over him. The regular version of Seregios then isn't too difficult. He's really fast, but his damage isn't crazy high as a base. So it basically is just a fight of patience. It's a marathon. You want to take your time, dodge his combos, let him tire himself out, and then use the openings he gives you for big damage. That said, his tempered version is an 8-star tempered monster, and that means that his damage goes up through the roof. That, combined with the speed that he always has, and his longer combos as well, makes him an absolute nightmare and tempered in a good way. Tempered Steve is the definition of a glass cannon. Compared to a lot of the 8-star monsters, his health isn't crazy. Using boulders that deal 4% of a monster's HP to check, a 3-star Tempered Seregios will be in the vicinity of 28,000 health, and a 5-star Tempered Seregios is somewhere around 35,000 health, which is right around a 20% difference between 3 purple stars and 5 purple stars. So if you're looking for one of the most challenging quests in the game possible, the 5-star is incredible for that purpose. But if you just want the rewards from the hunt, if you want to go in and out, minimal risk, especially with the fact that Tempered Seregios has a significantly increased drop chance on his gem on the Dissenter, the 3-star Seregios is actually significantly easier to do that with than the 5-star. Even outside of the damage difference between them, a potential 20% gap in HP means way less opportunities to mess up and cart on the 3-star version of the quest. As well, the tempered version of this monster can also spawn in wyvria. Honestly, I think the wyvria version is harder than fighting him on the windward plains. There are less environmental interactables like boulders or vine traps, which you absolutely should be using against him. There is less open space to dodge his attacks than with the big desert, and there's no chance of a Rey Dau existing in the wyvria either, which I mentioned because, again, the Rey Dau turf war actually does a fair bit of damage to Seregios at pretty much no cost or risk to you. So that's a really nice bonus if they happen to both be on the windward plains together while you are hunting Seregios. That said, just for the sake of mentioning it, Seregios' nest, the place where he sleeps on the windward plains, is the one that is shared with Gypseros, the one that he normally gets to use. Then Seregios' nest on wyvria is actually the Zoo Woo nest. He steals it and takes it over while he's on that map. For things to counter him and make his fight a little bit easier, flash pots are great against Seregios because he is a flying monster. Unlike most flying monsters though, he does not stay in the air for a long period of time, so if you want to flash him down to the ground, you'll need to do it more predictively with knowledge of his patterns rather than reactively like you can do with most monsters. One good example is that he will always almost immediately go into the air after he does a roar, unless he is exhausted. That said, I would also consider not using your flash pods aggressively, not trying to use them to just get more damage in, because of two main reasons. The first is that he has some really long dangerous combos that do involve flying. So if you know that you are, or another party member is, in serious danger of carting, you can just pop a flash in the middle of these combos to stop him from doing the really dangerous finishers. Or for the pin move specifically. His pin attack is super deadly. In most builds, it will just straight up kill you on the tempered version if it hits you and lasts the full duration, and the only reliable way to stop it in the middle while solo is with a flash pod that you already have to have loaded before you get hit by the pin to begin with. In multiplayer, a fun thing that you can do is actually offset the pin attack while he is clawing at the player that he's pinning. It only works if he was going to be toppled by the next offset anyways, but it's a really neat thing that you can do to both save a hunter's life and get an opening for your own damage. As well, make sure that you bring traps, because Seregios can be trapped, both shock traps and pitfall traps, and the downtime that you get from this is a pretty big deal. Again, he's a glass cannon, which means any extra little bits of downtime you can get to deal damage to him will be significant in increasing the speed of your hunt. For statuses, Seregios is average weakness to everything except for paralysis, which he is slightly resistant to but not fully immune, so statuses will work as standard for the most part. Then for element, this is the big one for him. He has a pretty significant thunder weakness on his legs, and a reasonably good one as well on his head too. For reference of how good these are, his leg thunder weakness is an equivalent thunder weak zone to Zoshia's wing arms. Not quite as good as Zoshia's head, but still, those are some of the best elemental matchups in the game, so thunder weapons are very good for this fight, and wouldn't you know it, there's a brand spanking new powerful thunder weapon for every weapon type, the legiacrus weapons, and they are fantastic against Steve for this exact reason. As well, it's worth mentioning that ice is his secondary weakness. He is still very weak to ice in the exact same places, but just slightly less weak to ice than he is to thunder, so unless you just have like a significantly better ice weapon available to you than a thunder weapon, you're just going to want to focus on thunder for your element. As well, for another equipment-based recommendation, a unique part of this fight is that it significantly leans towards iframe dodging. Most monsters in the game, you can avoid their attacks with predictive positioning, using rolls to cover large amounts of ground to avoid the actual area the attack is about to hit. But Steve is incredibly quick and good at tracking the player with most of his attacks, and the speed of his animations makes it more reasonable to dodge his attacks with the iframes of your roll rather than most monsters. So generally speaking, I recommend trying to learn his timings, learn his patterns, so that you can know how to iframe his attacks instead of just trying to outposition him and evade the attacks normally, as he will just win the war of positioning with about 90% of his attacks with his speed and his tracking. As a result of that, evade window as a skill is absolutely incredible against him, or if you really aren't comfortable with iframes, you can just use evade extender instead to try and get more distance. But personally, I think evade window is pretty much made for this fight. Not to mention that Seregios' own armor has tons of evade window on it, combined with adrenaline rush, which then gives you damage when you evade through an attack as well. So you can activate it constantly with the way that his fight works. This is actually one of those rare fights where it feels like it's almost worth having a set specifically made for fighting Seregios for all of these iframe dodges, because his pacing and his flow is just notably different from every other monster in the game. But the fun thing is that the set that you would want is essentially Seregios armor. That is, however, not completely necessary either, just a fun note of a good overlap between his own armor and the way that his fight feels. As well, for equipment purposes, I highly recommend Divine Protection as a skill above any other survival option for Tempered Seregios. He has a ton of high damage attacks, but only one of them that is a proper one-shot in most scenarios, which is the big, scary, just ground slam. This means usually he will take 2 hits to kill most players. Divine Blessing at maximum ranks is around a 20% chance to make the incoming hit do half damage. This means if you get hit by 2 hits in a row that would otherwise kill you, you have 2 separately rolling 20% chances to make that not happen. As well, you can eat for the Defender High meal skill, which is essentially a second independent Divine Blessing roll, meaning if you are about to take 2 attacks in a row and the damage would be just enough to kill you, you can get a 20% chance at half damage from Divine Blessing, a 20% chance at half damage from the Defender Meal, and that also will roll a second time for the second attack, and if any of those procs hits, you probably won't die. And overall, this combination will prevent a lot of carts that would otherwise happen in this fight. Not to mention that taking the full pin attack without interrupting the monster on Tempered Seregios is pretty much just guaranteed death, unless you have either Divine Blessing or Defender Meal, or both, because these effects can proc on every single hit of the pin attack, which is a lot of tiny hits. And if you get more than a couple of procs even, if you aren't quite full health, you can still actually survive this pin using these skills and then recover. Aside from that, Seregios applies bleed with his scale shot ranged attacks and with his claw attacks as well. If you break his head, then when he uses his head to shoot out scales, it will fire out less scales, making it easier to deal with. Same thing with the tail, where if you break his tail, he will fire out less scales from his tail. Bleed, as the status which comes from these scales, will drain your health until you get the debuff off of you. The standard way to remove bleed without any items or anything is to stop moving and then crouch for 3 seconds. But an easy way to make this way simpler is to just carry a stack of rations with you into combat. Rations will clear bleed from you when you eat them, and you can eat them faster than well done steaks, which does the same, so they are the ideal item for this. They also get selected by the optimal status recovery slot that you can put on your customized radial menu, so carry these and life will become much easier in this fight. Or you could even build the bleed resistance decorations into your armor set so you don't have to bleed to begin with, but that is a fair bit more investment, and in my opinion, it is lower value to do that than using your 1-slot sockets for Divine Blessing in this fight, at least for the tempered version. Next up, he has a couple of combos that I want to call out and explain how to deal with in the hopes that it helps, because they're quite deadly. For the most part, his most dangerous moves are done with his claws from the sky. So if he goes up into the air, perk up, pay attention, get ready to dodge multiple times in a row. From the air, he has 3 separate nasty animations, and he can link them together in different ways to make full combos. The one that he does most frequently to start a combo is just a forward diving claw smack. This one is easily dodged by rolling into the attack just before he lands. You can use the iframes to get to the other side of him, making sure that there is the least overlap between his attack and your hitbox by rolling through it. If he only does this one time, that means he is about to follow it up into 2 sideways swoops. The sideways swoop is a much longer animation that can sort of fake you out if you're not expecting it, but this is pretty dodgeable once you learn the timing. He will come in from either the left or right side, and then he will always follow that up by doing the exact same attack from the opposite direction to try and catch you off guard. If his claws are coming from the right side, you want to dodge to the right. You want to dodge into the attack's direction. This gives you the highest chance of iframing through it, and if it comes from the left side, you do the same thing and dodge left. You can also try to dodge forwards to just get out of the hitbox because it is a sideways swiping hitbox, but this has mixed results depending on the angle of the terrain, which is a thing that you'll have to deal with a lot in the windward plains. If he does the forward claw slam and then gets up and does another forward claw slam instead of the swoop, that means he's about to do his biggest, nastiest combo. It's the one he seems to do the most frequently. When he's tempered, he does it all the time, and it is very frequent compared to the non-tempered version. It's 2 of the forward claw slams in a row. You want to dodge forward through these as best as you can, as I said before. Then he will fire out some scales at you as a ranged attack. That will be followed by his highest damage attack, the one that zooms your camera out before he goes for a massive slam on the player. The hit that is the most dangerous in this combo is the final one. You can get hit by one of the initial starting slams and then even one of the range scales as well and probably survive, but if you get hit by the slam, it's pretty much just cart city, so you want to focus on avoiding the slam above all else. The slam itself actually has the worst tracking of any of his attacks, and so it's the only one that I recommend trying to dodge positionally instead of iframing it. Generally speaking, if you are up and moving after the first 2 hits, you can just start sprinting directly away from him. Do a slight turn to avoid the scale shot, but if you manage to keep sprinting, he just won't be able to hit you with the slam ever. It stops tracking you once he goes into the air. So if you are sprinting, once he goes up in the air, he just won't be able to reach you. Alternatively, if you are in a tougher position and cannot sprint, weapon unsheathed, stuff like that, I recommend trying to run essentially forward and go under him. He jumps forwards towards you, which means to minimize the frames of his attacks that overlap with your hitbox, you want to run forwards to try and get past him and make him leapfrog you. That said, if you get hit by a scale, that's the most dangerous situation, as you will be knocked down for a moment before he does the big slam, but in this situation you have the exact amount of time that you would need to then sheathe your weapon and do a Superman dive, which makes you immune for the actual ground slam. All that said, if you are using a guard weapon, you can just do perfect guards, as his timings are very tight, but very predictable. They're very fun to play against. And if you are using an offsetting weapon, 3 of the hits of this combo are technically offsettable. The final hit is much harder to offset, but you can do it. And for hammer, the timing of these often lines up that you can even get 2 offsets in a row in this combo if you don't get a knockdown on the first one, which is really fun as well. I should also make quick mention that offset weapons just feel fantastic against him in general. Guarding is great to deal with his moveset if you have access to guard within your weapon. It makes it feel way less dangerous, but if you have an offset, this fight becomes a playground essentially, because everything but the ranged attacks can be offset. And offsetting not only applies the knockdown buildup that can lead to free damage of course, but if you offset an attack, you don't take any damage from it. So you can go out of your way to use offset attacks as a defensive mechanism, basically, allowing you to output damage without taking any yourself as long as your timing is good, but that does take a lot of practice of course. Then finally, let's talk wounds. Tempered Seregios has super high wound resistance. I've never seen him get more than 1 of the blue glowing tempered wounds within a hunt, and many times in multiplayer hunts where your damage is spread around more body parts, I haven't seen a single tempered wound throughout the entire hunt, multiple times. But tempered wounds, when popped, are a guaranteed full knockdown. So if you see a blue glowing wound on the monster, make sure that you hit it with a focus strike, and make sure that you are ready to do a big combo to follow it. As well, Seregios does have a weak point, which is the term for the bonus wounds that occasionally pop up after a monster does a big attack. For Seregios, anytime he does one of his larger aerial claw combos, he will come down and his leg will sort of flare up for a moment as he scratches it on the ground, or as he tries to pull it out of the ground if it is stuck. During that animation, his leg will glow as a weak point, so you can get a free focus strike on it if you're close enough. If you do that, you will get a minor knockdown every single time, so this is a great way to create more damage openings in the fight, provided that you stay in combat range after his combos. After you punish a weak point, it will not happen again for a short duration, it won't be able to glow again, so make sure that you just use your focus mode to check if it's glowing every time he finishes one of these combos, and if you just keep on top of this and do it every time it's available, and punish him, you will actually make the fight way easier than if you didn't know about this, or if you ignored it completely. That just about does it for today then everyone, everything you need to know about Seregios in Monster Hunter Wilds. He is currently one of my favorite fights to actually engage with in the game, especially the tempered version, which, while it doesn't give me quite the same constant feeling of dread as like fighting a max star gore magala, tempered Seregios is a monster that can go from feeling perfectly fine and happy to hurting you in about half a second. His pace is super high, he's extremely fast, but he has very memorizable patterns, his attacks are very iframeable, which is fun to play around, and as someone who is spending a lot of time with the new updated hammer in Title Update 2, practicing my new offset moves on him has been an absolute blast. I hope you've all enjoyed this video then, and hopefully it helps you out in your future hunts. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.